why don't we get started? Welcome, everybody. Those that are here live in Sherborne Town Hall and those who are joining us remotely. This will be a fascinating and instructive presentation on native and drought-tolerant landscaping. My name's Andy Lauterbach, and joining me here are Tom Trainer and Fred Cunningham, and we are members of Sherborne's Energy and Sustainability Committee, which is hosting this event. I want to thank our terrific co-sponsors who made this all possible. They are the Sherborne 350th Anniversary Steering Committee, the Upper Charles Climate Action, the Sherborne Council on Aging, the Sherborne Open Space Committee, the Sherborne Groundwater Committee, the Sherborne Garden Club, and the Bogostog Garden Club of Sherborne. Before I turn the mic over to our esteemed speaker, Trevor Smith, there are a couple things that I need to mention. Trevor will entertain questions at the end of his presentation. For those who are here at Town Hall, if you want to ask a question, simply just raise your hand and you will be called on in turn. For those who are joining us remotely, just either write your question in the chat box and it will be read here, or tap the yellow hand raise icon on your screen, and you will be called on as well when it's your turn. For those of you who are also joining us remotely, we have muted your microphone, but in case you've also muted your own microphone, if you're asking a question, please make sure to unmute. For the audience here in Town Hall, make sure your phone ringers are off. Please check, and if you need any water, down the long hall on the left is a room on the left and a water fountain in that room. Lastly, if you would like to view this presentation again, or if you know somebody who missed it and you want to share it with them, this presentation is being recorded by our cable TV, DSC TV, and it will be available on YouTube. You just merely do a search on
recording in progress.
YouTube, and you will find it.
Every mind in need of something.
Yeah. Well, we are very, very fortunate to have Trevor Smith speak to all of us tonight. Trevor is the Design and Education Manager at Weston Nurseries. He has a wealth of hands-on experience and is an award-winning regenerative landscape designer, specializing in green infrastructure, native plant design, and habitat creation. He is past, present, and current trustee of the Ecological Landscape Alliance and holds so many certifications and accomplishments, it would take far too long for me to go through them all. But there are a couple I do want to mention. He is the co-creator of the Pollinator Garden Lab Curriculum Initiative, designer and trainer at the Boston's Community Gardens, lead designer of the Somerville Mystic Rain Garden Initiative, recipient of the Boston Greenovate Award and the US EPA's Environmental Merit Award. He is truly a national expert in native landscaping, and it gives me great pleasure to introduce to you Trevor Smith.
Thank you so much. I have been really looking forward to this. Winter is my education season, so I do a lot of presenting throughout the winter to different clubs and everything else, but I've really been looking forward to this because of the breadth of the audience, and I'm really inspired that a town, as part of their 350th initiative and everything else, is really on board.
Excuse me, Trevor, they can't hear you remotely.
How about now? All right, we should be good now. All right, so just bouncing back a little bit for those who couldn't hear me a little bit. I'm really happy to be here, mostly because the entire town seems to be behind these initiatives. They're extremely important, especially for a town that is on well and septic. I've done most, as you heard, most of my career has been in the city, so we had different issues there. So for those who don't know, green infrastructure, that may be a new term to many of you, and that is a term that involves managing stormwater using nature. So it can be as simple as a rain garden or a rain barrel, and as complicated as bioswales and regenerative swaths. So that is a term that if you hadn't heard it before, that is something that I've specialized in, and I teach across the country. But we are here to be discussing native plants. We are here to be discussing how your property, whatever size it might be, could be a postage stamp. I live in Arlington, I have a postage stamp. You might have acres and acres. But you may not know that your property can actually help offset climate change in addition to cleaning Sherburne's water supply. So growing wild, let's just get started. Plant the change you wish to see in the world. So when we talk about native plants, when we talk about the change we want to see in the world, when we talk about just planting and growing wild, what is it that we think about? Do we think about native plants looking like this? There's many different types. There's a plant for every single situation and all sorts of shapes. This right here is one of my favorite lawn alternatives. This is the native strawberry. So this is a great lawn alternative that we will be getting into later. Do we think of things like this when we think of planting the change we wish to see in the world? One of the reasons that I plant is to invite certain friends to people's yards, including my yard. And if you ever have the opportunity to have this spotted salamander in your yard, you know you're doing something right. So amphibians, especially salamanders, are called indicator species, and they are extremely important, and they are a sign that you are doing something right. And then we also want to be seeing these guys right here. Some of you may not, but yes, we do.
You got to turn your camera back on.
Sorry.
And of course, we all want to see this one right here, the poster child for all things pollinator. Okay, so this has actually happened now multiple times, but back in 2021, I was actually on a national call, and I was speaking to people who were evacuated from the wildfires in California, as well as the floods that were happening down south. So here I was sitting in New England and speaking to people who were either taking their call from a hotel because California was burning, or had moved to a different state because their state had flooded. And that was a real awakening for me to realize that and to be a part of that. Because it's one thing to see it on the news, but to actually be hearing it and experiencing it is a whole other thing. The truth is that New England is warming faster than the rest of the world because of the way weather moves and the tides move. New England is actually warming faster than the rest of the world. Now, you wouldn't think that. We would be thinking of, for instance, like in this image, you can see how warm the continent of Africa is, but New England is actually moving right along. And the sad part of that is there is no going back. It's never going to go back to the way that it was. So we can either sit in that and become really depressed, or we can just do something now. And we may not turn it around all the way, but we can start doing something now, and why not do something? So what could all of this warming and what could climate change mean for our native plants, which is one of the reasons why we're here? Well, if our seasons change, and without our seasons, the native seeds won't undergo the required cold period for germination. That's called stratification. And that is something that last winter, and we might be facing this winter, it may not be cold enough, long enough for certain seeds to stratify. Many of them need 90 days. And if we don't have 90 days of really cold weather, those seeds won't germinate the next season. That is going to mean fewer native plants moving forward. Southern invasives are going to, and invasive plants and insects will begin to move north. One of the great things about a New England winter is it's a reset button. So every single season, invasive plants from the south move north, insects begin to take hold, and then we have a New England winter, which we haven't had in a while, but we have a New England winter. And that New England winter knocks back those insect populations. It knocks back and it resets those invasive plants or those southern plants that have moved forward that we don't necessarily want up here. So that reset button is happening less and less. And so those insects, whether it be ticks and mosquitoes or other insects that have moved up, are actually not getting, their populations aren't getting knocked all the way back. The timing of blooms and their specialized pollinators that have evolved over millennia may no longer coincide. This is a huge thing, and this will also happen with birds. Birds may migrate north, show up here, and their food sources that they've relied on forever and ever may not be available at the time. Or those food sources may have already gone past what the birds were looking for. Same thing will happen with insects. There are certain insects, one of my favorites is actually skunk cabbage. Skunk cabbage, which comes up super early, if anybody has paid attention to it, it shows up through the snow with its brown casing that melts all the snow around it so that it can kind of come to bloom early. It is pollinated by a fly that emerges at the same time. If they no longer coincide, then we are going to have less skunk cabbage, which may not bother you, but there are many plants that actually bloom just like that, but we'll also lose the fly. So now we're looking at two species that are going to suffer. Longer and hotter summers are going to hurt our fall seasons by stressing our plants out. This can be a kick for the New England economy. And then the big one that has awoken everybody in my household is the warmer winters are going to decrease maple syrup production. And that will mean breakfast is going to really stink moving forward. Because, I mean, unless you're a fan of fake maple syrup, that's a big one. If you need one reason, just make it maple syrup. Already we are seeing the effects, and actually just yesterday I gave an interview to the Boston Globe about the effects of climate change and the hardiness zone map, etc. But already we are seeing the effects of climate change, and we are seeing the effects like right here in this dragonfly. So because of the change of the UV light that is making its way down to the earth, the pattern of the dragonfly wings are changing, which is making the male dragonflies unrecognizable to the females. Now, dragonflies are a huge mosquito control. We need our dragonflies. We want our dragonflies. But they're no longer recognizable, or they're becoming less recognizable to the females, and we all know what that means. So we don't want to lose our dragonfly population, and this is simply in changes in the UV light that is making its way to the earth. Our spider population. You may not want to see these guys, but the insect population is changing dramatically, and this is actually in part our fault. Well, it's actually almost all our fault, but there's a number of reasons. So there's a multi-billion-dollar industry that is a war on insects. And we are just against insects. However, those insects, those plummeting insect populations are leading, as we'll learn later, to plummeting bird populations. Also, just aside from using our sides on the insects, our lighting has really thrown off the insect population. Because we leave our porch lights on, because we light our cities, because we're scared of the dark, some very smart spiders have learned to make their webs right next to our porch lights. This has led to the unbalanced demise of many insects, especially our moth populations, which are extremely important for pollination and which are extremely important for our bird populations. So it's when you really think about it, and we don't think about it, I think about it, but I want you to think about it. When you really think about it, it's amazing how connected things are, and how just by pulling one little string, so many other things begin to fall apart. The days of landscaping for beauty alone are over. This is a slide that I left in here to tell you, but this is a slide that I created for my fellow designers when I present to them. Because we all want beautiful landscapes for ourselves. Designers come at our landscapes, your landscapes, with ego, trying to create these big, beautiful designs, and they're just trying to create beautiful designs. The current approach to landscaping is akin to sending plastic, rubber, and steel to a factory, not knowing who works there, and hoping a car comes out on the other side. Okay, we buy bags of these big, beautiful promises, bright, colorful bags that say it's all we need for our garden. And the same thing happens with the landscape community. A bag tells a landscaper, you put this on your client's lawn and it's going to be great and they're going to be happy. You use this on your client's garden and they're going to be happy and this is all you need. We've all bought into that. But we don't actually know what our landscape needs more often than not. Does our lawn really need those chemicals that we're putting on it? Probably not. Not if we have a healthy soil, we don't really need to do that at all. Not if we have healthy landscape practices, we don't need to do that at all. But we just throw stuff at it. And part of the reason we throw stuff at it is because we don't understand it anymore. And it's not necessarily our fault because we've become distracted with other things, and that's okay, and not everybody needs to be a horticulturist. But we all need to reconnect to the planet. We all need to dial back in. And so that has been very much my mission. We throw around the word sustainability, but even that's getting blurry. Our definition of sustainability really is, how much can I take before I break it? How much can I take before it's too much? Rather than what we think we're saying when we talk about sustainability. Now, I promise you, this is not a depressing presentation, but I need to set the stage and get some terms and definitions down. So if there's actually one slide that you pay attention to this whole time, I'm hoping that it's this one. As I was introduced, I am a regenerative land care professional. What that means is, some people will call it an eco-landscaper. Eco-landscapers are very much into organic land care. Eco-landscapers are very much into native plants. A regenerative land care professional is about getting Mother Nature's systems back online and then getting out of the way. Restoring soil health, restoring hydrology, restoring plant communities, and then letting Mother Nature take over, because we as a people have set things out of balance. So the best way that I can describe this is, if you look at our current situation, landscape situation, and climate situation, like having the flu. You don't want to sustain having the flu. You don't want to feel like crap forever. You want to regenerate and then sustain. And that's what it really is, what it's all about. You want to get your system back online and get healthy and then sustain from there. So that is what regenerative land care is essentially about. We are trying to get the earth healthy again and then start sustaining. So throwing around the word sustainability right now really isn't getting anybody anywhere, because we don't want to sustain this situation. Like we said, New England is heating faster than the rest of the world. The insect population and bird populations are plummeting. We don't want to sustain that at all. We want to get these things back up and going again. So that's why I say, plant the change you wish to see in the world. Like that guy right there. So what are we talking about? So we're talking about native plants. And to talk about native plants, we need a definition, because what happens is, a lot of people come to the nursery, I go to visit a lot of clients' houses, and they try to talk to me about native plants, and they try to understand plants. And it's, the way I look at native plants is like approaching a cuisine you don't know. So like, we'll just say maybe it's Thai cuisine or Indian cuisine. Like, you know you've liked it, you have some, and you've liked it, but then you go to the restaurant and you're like, I don't know these ingredients, I don't know what to order. So that's what this is kind of this part of the presentation is all about. Let's kind of talk about some of those terms and definitions, so when you go to the restaurant, you know what to order, you get a little familiar with the ingredients. So let's just look at the term native plants. Native plants are plants indigenous to a given area and geologic time. This includes plants that have developed or occur naturally or existed for many years in an area. Native plants can be weeds or aggressive, but native plants are never invasive. And we have weeds. Weeds are an undesirable plant, or a plant out of place. Weeds can be native, they can be aggressive, and they can be invasive. Now the plant, the weed, here is common milkweed. It is a native plant. It is one of the monarch keystones. However, the common milkweed, can be rather aggressive, move through your garden, and a lot of people will call it a weed. There are people in my house who will call it a weed. So then we have aggressive plants. This is the very important term that I really want you to get, because this is the one that people get confused. Aggressive plants are plants that spread through your garden faster than you would like. Aggressive plants may dominate, but they are not invasive because they do not harm the ecosystem. Aggressive plants can be weeds and they can be natives. In this picture we have bee balm. Bee balm is in the mint family. This bee balm has absolutely taken over my garden. Do I hate it? No. I actually love the fact that it's taken over my garden. But it is aggressive. It is not invasive. Invasive plant is a specific term designated by the state or national agricultural authorities. An invasive plant is a threat to our ecosystems, agriculture, horticulture, humans, and livestock. Invasive plants are never native, but they can be considered weeds. So invasive plants are not from here. And they have come here and they have been moved far away from anything that would naturally eat them. All of its natural predators and anything that would kind of keep it in check, it has been moved far away. So it has then just been able to take over when left unchecked. You're going to hear the term, or when you come to Western nurseries, and let's just say we're going to plant a pollinator garden. The term straight species. This is the original recipe. This is how a plant has evolved from the beginning. So when you're looking at native plants, you have native plants that are the straight species. The straight species of columbine is actually red or red and yellow. That's the original recipe, how it was made. And then we have the original recipe of echinacea also in this picture. So that's straight species. From there we move to native R. A native R is a cultivated version of the straight species. Here you can see, and we have millions of different colors and versions of echinacea. Not the same thing. We also have multiple colors and versions of columbine. It's not the same thing. So a native R isn't terrible. It is a cultivar of a native plant. However, anytime you change a plant's flower color, anytime you change a plant's leaf color, anytime you change the plant's flower shape, you are altering the plant from its wholesomeness in the landscape. So when you change a plant's flower shape or color, that plant will no longer have the same nectar count or the same pollen count as the straight species. So if you start to look at it, think about it like processed food. So the straight species is like picked from your garden or from the farmer's market. And then we get into native Rs, which are somewhat processed food. So it's still good for you. It's like out of a can or out of the freezer. It's still could be good for you. Not the same thing. We're getting a little processed here. So another thing would be anytime a plant, and we're going to see this a little bit later, and I'll readdress it later. But anytime you change the leaf color of a plant. So there are many native plants, like the geranium, which I'll address later. The native geranium has a green leaf. There are many hybrids of that geranium that have burgundy leaves. Once you change the leaf to burgundy, you've changed the chemistry of the leaf. You've increased the anthocyanins for the science geeks out there. When you do that, it becomes indigestible to the caterpillars that would naturally feed on that plant. So you can go and you can say that because it'll say it's a native plant. Geranium maculatum, it's Geranium maculatum, they both are, but one is straight species and one's called espresso or whatever they want to call it, boom chakalaka. It's not the same thing. So it'll still be great for the bees, but it will not be great for all of the other pollinators involved. Ecoregion, this is what I deal with a lot. So when you are talking to anybody about native plants, you want to get an idea of what they consider native plants. Some people consider a native plant anything within 50 miles of wherever you're standing. Some people will consider a native plant of anything that's in Massachusetts. Some people say the East Coast. Some people say New England. You want to get on the same page. There's no wrong answer. I use ecoregion. So an ecoregion is an area determined by common geography, climate, and plant communities. So there are 5 ecoregions in New England. We, the blue one, are ecoregion 59. You can see that the Cape is different. So ecoregion 59 goes from southern Maine to northern New York. So it runs the entire coast. Now, if you think about it, the terrain all up and down the coast of Massachusetts is pretty much the same. The plant communities are also the same. Now, when you go out on the Cape, that all changes. So it's a whole different ecoregion out on the Cape. But so when I'm talking about native plants with people, I'm talking about ecoregion 59. If I come to your house and you say, I want native plants in my yard, I'm going to choose plants from that ecoregion. And we have ecotype. This is another term. This is when you really start to talk to plant geeks, or when you really start to geek out on native plants, you're going to start hearing terms like ecotype. This to me is one of my favorites. Now the actual definition, kind of boring. Locally adapted species grown in a specific region. Ecotypes are plants grown from seed. Excuse me. Native plant seeds gathered from local areas and grown from seed have the characteristics of the area imprinted on their genome. They're better adapted to local conditions such as weather, soil, than plants grown outside of the region. So what does all that science speak mean? What that means is, let's just say these milkweed seeds here are from a milkweed plant that just went to seed this fall. What that means is that milkweed plant imprinted the memory of this past summer on those seeds. So these seeds right here, when they germinate this spring, will realize, they will remember and know that last summer was extremely wet. They'll also know that the summer before that was extremely dry. And so they will have the memory of Sherburne's climate imprinted on them, which is, to me, is kind of beautiful and romantic. So what that also means is, if you buy a milkweed that was started and grown in North Carolina, which a lot of the plants get brought up and brought in from different nurseries, that's going to have its memory in North Carolina. Like many of you, if you weren't actually born here, you will have memories and you'll feel like a little bit like you're connected to a different place in the country or in the world. I like to say that an ecotypic plant from Massachusetts drops its eyes. So it's from here and it drops its eyes. And if it's from somewhere else, it will pronounce its eyes. Biodiversity, this is very important. This is very important on a number of levels. So, monocultures like our lawn. Monocultures like our somewhat sterile landscapes that we have. We want to have biodiversity. It doesn't necessarily have to look like this picture. This picture might really creep some people out, like you're way too busy. And I understand that. What I'm trying to point out here is, with all of these plants, we are doing massive amounts of good for the planet, and it's actually creating a lower maintenance garden. So with all of these plants, if a pest, we'll call them pests, I try to take that out of my vernacular, if an unwanted insect were to attack one of these plants in here, the chances are, because we have all of these plants, the predator of that plant will be available to then handle that invader that is there. Moreover, with all these different plants that we have different root depths. So we're drawing nutrients from different depths in the soil and bringing that up, which is enriching our soil. Also, with all of those different root depths, we're improving the hydrology of our soil on a number of different levels, in part because water will follow the roots down. So if you have roots that are 6 inches deep and 3 feet deep, water is going to follow those roots all the way down, and you're going to open up that soil. Also, roots feed the life in the soil. And that gets a little more involved, but ultimately roots through photosynthesis put sugar into the soil, they feed the life in the soil, enriching the soil. So in doing that at different depths, you're going to have healthy soil all the way down to 3 feet, should you do that. So this is why we want to plant multiple types of plants. This is why we want to think about biodiversity, because having biodiversity in plants leads to biodiversity in insects, leads to biodiversity in our bird life and everything else. So it's on and on. So why natives? Well, the best argument for natives was actually presented in this slide right here by a friend of mine, Dan Wilder. Here we have 2 geraniums. On the left, we have a greenhouse-grown geranium. And on the right, we have the geranium maculatum that I was talking about, our native geranium. So, this is, like I said, this is my best argument for growing natives. This is also one of the exact reason why, as a regenerative land care professional, I focused more on native plants. So with these plants, both of them will attract honeybees. That's not hard. Honeybees kiss everybody. Both of them will attract some bumblebees, because some bumblebees are generalists, so some bumblebees will go to both plants. However, the native plant will also attract mining bees, the white-lined sphinx moth, the white tussock moth. In fact, the native plant will provide for 27 different butterfly and moth species, as well as all of those bees and flies. So over 30 species. So by putting one plant in your yard, not only will it be beautiful for you, but it will support over 30 different species. So why wouldn't you do that? Was the question that I asked myself. I can put this in, and this is beautiful for me, and this is beautiful for my client, but that's it. Or I can put this in, it's beautiful for me, it's beautiful for my client, and it's providing for over 30 different species. So then just your decision alone can have a massive impact, and that's just one plant. So why does it matter? Well, let's talk about why it matters. Sometimes it's really obvious. Hummingbirds, we all love hummingbirds. Let's put red flowers, let's put bee balm, native plants. We'll put cardinal flower and bee balm in and attract those hummingbirds, because that's how you get hummingbirds, right? That's what you want. Other times it's a lot more subtle. There's our hummingbird, loving that red flower. But we have this cinnamon fern. You wouldn't think that a cinnamon fern or a shade plant would be vital for the hummingbirds that you're trying to attract to your property. However, if you really want to have hummingbirds on your property, then you're going to enable them to make a nice soft nest for their babies. 4 million hectares, which is 98 million acres of native vegetation, have been replaced by managed landscapes. All of our suburban landscapes and urban landscapes equal about 98 million acres, which is all the land that of all of our national parks and the land that was used to grow corn in 2014. So if you've ever been to a national park, it seems immense, it seems giant. We'll put all of those together, and our managed landscape is larger than that. Then you throw all the corn, the farming land, and if any of you are from the Midwest or have been through the Midwest and seen tracts of corn, it's pretty amazing. So all of that together, that's a lot of land. And this is where I implore you, and I say to my colleagues, this is where we can make a huge impact. Because I alone see about 325 different clients per season. I alone work on about 100 acres a year. That's 100 acres that I can have a positive impact on. I can affect the hydrology, I can affect the plant communities, I can better the soil in that area, and I can also potentially bring back either extinct, or not extinct, but endangered species or threatened species. Studies have shown that the use of non-native plants is linked to the decline in the abundance and diversity of insects. The decline in the diversity of insects is linked to the decline in bird populations. Now, you might not like bugs, but I bet you like goldfinches, chickadees, and cardinals. So you can't really have one without the other, because it takes 9,000 caterpillars for chickadee parents to raise a clutch of 5. That's a lot of caterpillars. And we don't have all those caterpillars if we are continuing to plant exotic species, because the caterpillars don't live on the exotic species. The caterpillars live on the native plants. So if we want to have that, we can't have one without the other. And while we're talking about that, it's good to know that in the spring, all those songbirds don't want your bird seed, so save your money. The songbirds want caterpillars in the spring. In the spring, they want protein. They're trying to feed their babies. They don't feed their babies seed, they feed their babies caterpillars. So they want protein. This is why I advocate for the native plants and having all those caterpillars. Your bird seed is key for helping them through the winter, because it's providing that fat, it's providing that protein for them to get through the winter. But that's not what they want when they're raising their babies. So in the spring, and if you want to save yourself some money, take your bird feeders down and then put them back up in the winter. The plants you choose could save a species. You could all be superheroes. After tonight, you could all just don capes and run around the yard if you want. Because you could save these 3 ladies right here. 3 bumblebee species, local bumblebee species, are all endangered. They're either locally extinct or endangered across Massachusetts and New England. Just by planting some of the plants that we talked about, or at least one of these 15 plants, if you just put one in, you will be helping those species. The reason they are locally endangered is because they are specialists. They're like really picky kids. They don't eat a whole lot. So they're specialists of certain plants, these plants right here. Because we don't plant these plants right here, their populations are diminishing to the point where they are locally extinct in certain places. So just by planting one of these, you don't have to plant all of them, but just one could help kind of change the tide. So let's talk about native plants, because I run up against this a lot, and there are common misconceptions, like this one right here, just as I suspected. She's nothing but a common Mobile vulgaris, from my favorite movie, Alice in Wonderland, the Disney version. Loved it growing up. Everybody thinks that, not everybody, but many people think that native plants are weeds, that native plants are messy. And this is why they don't want them. They think of meadows, they think of roadsides, they think uncontrolled when they think about native plants. Well, let's just discuss the truth about native plants, because there is truth to all of this. Native plants, their bloom time is shorter. This is why we have cultivars, nativars, etc. Because the bloom time of a native plant is shorter, the straight species is shorter than any of the cultivars. Some varieties seed about, like the native columbine, native asters. They seed their way through your garden. If you want a plant that you're just going to put in the ground and it's going to stay right there and it's going to stay put and never move and look the same every single year, then a cultivar is for you, because the native plant is going to move about a bit. I really like that. The asters never come up the same twice in my yard, year to year. So some years it's a big drift, a big stream through my garden, and then some other years it's just pockets. It's all in what the birds ate in the fall and where the seeds fell and germinated. And I don't mind my garden looking different every year. They do need water to get established. This is a big one. People are like, I want native plants because you don't have to water it, you don't have to fertilize it, you don't have to anything. Well, they do need water to get established. Once they're established, they need less water. Now, this goes for drought-tolerant plants as well, because Weston Nurseries grows native plants. And I will tell you that, like, we'll just say Black-Eyed Susans, wonderful drought-tolerant plant. When it's at Weston Nurseries, it's got a bougie Bellagio lifestyle. Okay, it's getting watered, it's getting loved. The grower and I usually go out in the morning singing to it. So then it goes to your garden, and it does need some water, because it's like, wait a minute. It's like, think about yourself coming home from vacation. You're like, where's my cocktail? Where's my room service? So, and then you get back into your routine, and that's what will happen with that Black-Eyed Susan. It will remember how to grow, and it'll be like, all right, I can do this, and then it will be drought tolerant moving forward. But in the beginning, you have to kind of take it down off of vacation, or like kids going to school, you kind of have to like ramp it up and change the sleep schedule. They do require fewer inputs. Why? Because native plants love crappy New England soil. You don't really have to do anything to it. They evolved a million years in crappy New England soil. They love our New England soil. They love the rockiness. They love the acidity. It's great. They don't love the compaction. But they love all that going on. They love the rotting pine needles and oak leaves. Your lawn doesn't, but the native plants do. They don't look messy. In fact, one of the biggest requests that I have are for composed meadows or composed native gardens. So if you think of a natural meadow and just stuff everywhere, and that might be beautiful and picturesque to you, or for some of your sensibilities, it might be a little too much, and that might be the messy native that you're thinking about. However, you can compose all of these plants just like you do all your other plants and have a nice organized garden using native plants. They will attract wildlife. If you hate birds, butterflies, bees, etc., then you do not want to incorporate native plants. If you want to see these populations disappear off the planet, then please do not put native plants in your garden. There's a native plant for every situation. There are native plants for sun, shade, lawn alternatives, which we'll talk about later, wet areas, dry areas. There is a native plant for any situation that we have. And nibbling is okay. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. But having something nibbling on your garden is all right. If nothing's eating your garden, you did something wrong. So inevitably, usually around July, what will happen is the pollinator gardens for people that I put in last year, somebody's going to call me and they're going to say, Trev, something is eating my garden. There's caterpillars everywhere. And I have to find a very tactful way to say, where do butterflies come from? That's exactly what we want. We want something eating our garden. So if something is decimating your plants, and this is where we got things confused, something nibbling your plants is fine. If something decimates your plants, there's something wrong with your garden. It's not the insects. The insect's job is actually to remove weak and sick plants so that healthy plants can live. So all those beetles and caterpillars that are decimating your plant, it's because your plant is sick. And you need to address what is wrong with my garden. We kind of bypassed that and made the insect the enemy and went after the insect with all these different poisons and sides, which then there's collateral damage to that. So if you have plants that are getting decimated, it's best to look at your soil. It's best to look at the health of your garden, because if your plant is photosynthesizing at full potential, then it is actually indigestible to caterpillars and beetles and nibbling insects. Because, and this gets a little sciencey, but when your plant photosynthesizes at its full potential, it's forming complete proteins. And the insects can't digest complete proteins. So they'll nibble, but that will be it. When your plant is sick, it's not making complete proteins. So it is a total buffet for anything that wants to nibble it. And their job, like I said, is to get rid of the sick plants. So this is a way that we have to change our thinking in many ways. We've made insects the enemy, but they're really not. They're trying to help us. They think they're helping us, and then we go at them with sprays. So this is what you do want to see. You want to see a little all over your garden. So where to start when you're talking about native plants? How do we do this? Where do we start? We've got to start at the beginning. What is the beginning? The beginning is, why are you planting native? Are you planting native for low maintenance? It's true. Once established, native gardens are low maintenance. They need fewer inputs. They need less water. They certainly don't need fertilizer, especially if you maintain your garden in a natural way. We'll get into that too. Are you doing it to create habitat? Do you want to see more birds? Do you want to see pollinators? Are you just trying to create more habitat in your garden? And is that why you're planting natives? Do you want the pollinators? So one thing that I'm doing, and I will mention right now, in the town of Lexington, I've actually, we were just talking, it was talked about in the introduction, created a curriculum for K through 5. And so what we've done is we create a pollinator garden, a living laboratory at the school, and all grades are able to use it. So the first graders who are studying seeds start the seeds. The second graders who are studying pollinators actually plant the plants and do the garden. Third and fourth grade, they're working more on climate and soil. So we talk about the soil structure. Fifth graders also working on climate, and they're working on kind of habitats and things like that. So they're able to use the lab as well. And they're able to use that living lab or the pollinator garden. They're able to use it for art. They're able to use it for math. They're able to use it for science. They're able to use it for language arts. So it's become a real key at these elementary schools. Also starting to work this curriculum into the high school level, but there's a lot to be learned by observing nature and being involved in nature. And to have second graders be like, I love walking on grass in bare feet because it relieves my stress. And I'm like, that's exactly right. Because we talk about how grounding and earthing and touching the earth and working with the soil can help relieve your stress. And I talk to them about how if you're really stressed out or having a bad day, walk around in bare feet for like 3 minutes on the grass, and you're going to start to feel better. And so and they try it and they love it. So as we talk about habitat, pollinators, birds, I digress. I'm going to do that quite a bit. Are you trying to reduce your lawn? Are you sick of mowing? Are you sick of paying somebody to mow your lawn? Maybe to reduce your lawn, covering your septic. This is another big one. Septic meadows are huge. I do this so often because people are like, I have this massive expanse and nothing really grows there. What do? I can't place trees. I don't want to have more lawn. What can I do? Native plants. So in Littleton, I just put in 2 septic meadows, last season. Work on it constantly. It's something to consider. It brings biodiversity, and it's something to do with this massive area that you have. You do need to understand that native, exotics, and cultivars are not all the same thing. They don't have all the same impact. So if you are trying to create any of the impacts on the former slide, then you need to understand that a native straight species is going to be better than a nativar or a cultivar of a native, and that is going to be better than an exotic species. Native does not mean no maintenance. Unless you want to have an extremely wild area, any tended garden, any managed landscape, even if it's organic and wild looking, needs to be maintained to an extent. There's no such thing as a no maintenance garden. That is the actual wild. So if it is around your house, there is some maintenance to that garden. Having bees is a good thing. Happy bees don't sting. Again, this is a big one that I talk about with my kids. Happy bees don't sting. They're like, well, I've been stung. I said, when did you get stung? When I stepped on a bee. I'm like, well, if I stepped on you, would you get mad? And they're like, yep. I'm like, okay. Well, when I knocked over a bee's nest. Well, I'm like, if I knocked over your house, would you be mad? Yeah, okay. So happy bees don't sting. I walk around bees all the time. I walk through fields of bees. I walk around bees in the nursery yard. When they're doing their thing, they do not care about me one bit. Native gardens do look beautiful, and we have been talking about that. If you don't like the very wild look, you can do a composed look and still have native plants. Which leads us to lawns. Sorry. That's kind of like the whole transition, but now we've talked about native plants. We've talked about how to use native plants. We've talked about the benefits of native plants. So now let's bring all of that to our home. What do we have a lot of at our home in the United States? Well, we have 32 million acres of lawn in the United States. It is the largest managed crop in the United States. And I'm not going to get into, I already started with all like the doom and gloom slides and everything else. So I'm not going to get into that with lawn, just trust me, okay? But what we do to maintain our lawns and our current lawn paradigm that we have had since World War II, which was the dawn of the American lawn, has been very detrimental. So for those that don't know, and I'll just get into it really briefly, we had a lot of chemicals left over from World War II, and we were like, well, what do we do with all these chemicals? And they're like, you know what these chemicals are really great for? Fertilizer. If we put them on our lawns and we put them on our food, things will grow better. So we took war chemicals, put them on our lawn and in our food, and yes, but if you think about it, anytime you hear about bombs being built, somebody went and bought a bunch of fertilizer. So, it's not something that I want in my food, and it's not something that I want my kids or I myself want to play on. If I'm just going to go lay on the grass and stare at the sky, I do not want to be laying on anything like that. Lawns are a huge source of pollution. We put sides on our lawn. So we have broadleaf herbicides, which are going to create the monoculture of just our grass. We put fungicide on our lawn. That actually ends up killing all of the beneficial bacteria and fungus that are in the soil. When I was talking about healthy soil, healthy plants, when we put any sort of a fungicide or an herbicide on our lawn, we are actually killing all the beneficial bacteria and fungi in the soil. When we put insecticides on our lawn, we then inadvertently not only just kill the terrestrial above ground insects, we kill everything down below. So we're actually killing our soil. In which case, we need more fertilizer because the life in our soil is dead. So then our soil begins to revert to dirt. And we don't want dirt, we want to have soil. Soil is a living organism, dirt is inert. So the other piece is all of the oil and gas. So across America, more gas is spilled filling lawn equipment than the Exxon Valdez. Most of you are old enough to remember the Exxon Valdez oil spill. So all of those, if you think about even just filling your own lawnmower, we've all done it. I've definitely done it. You're filling your lawnmower, you overpour, that spills out. All of those little teaspoons, tablespoons, half cups, half gallons, whatever it might be, they add up across the country. And all that spilled oil adds up and is a huge source of pollution. So it's a huge source of pollution in the city because it washes off into the harbor. Here, it's poisoning your groundwater. So there's a big difference. All of those sides in killing the soil is your filter. The soil is filtering that rainwater. The soil is filtering all the water from above that you're drinking. So if you kill your soil life, you're killing your filter. So you want to have plants and you want to have soil life because you want that filtered water in your wells. And when you kill all that off, what happens is these chemicals begin to leach through because there's nothing to digest them. If they don't get digested by the plants, then the soil life can't break them down. The soil life can't break down the gasoline. If there's no gasoline and you spill gas on your lawn, the soil life will actually break it down back to its organic compounds again. That won't happen if you kill all the life in your soil. So now what I did here tonight is basically 3 talks and I crammed them all in to just this talk right here. So right now, I just want to touch on some lawn alternatives. So when do we use lawn alternatives? When we have more lawn than we need. So I am not a kill your lawn person. Believe it or not, you're probably looking at me and you're like, he's a kill your lawn guy. I'm not. I actually design with lawn. And so you do want lawn. Lawn has its place. Lawn is great for when we have kids. Lawn is great. It's a wonderful resting place. When you have a lot of gardens, it allows your eye to rest. Lawn is great for entertaining. Lawn is great for interacting with your garden and interacting with the planet. It's fun to walk on grass barefoot. It's not fun to walk like on sticks in the woods barefoot. So you want to have pieces of lawn. It's a great place to interact with nature. However, many of us have more lawn than we need. We have many people like I talk to, they're like, I hate mowing back there, or I hate paying somebody to come and mow all of this. And I'm like, well, why don't we shrink your lawn? And they're like, why would I do that? I'm like, because you hate taking care of all of it. So there are lawn alternatives. There are things we can do for that back 40, for the portions of the lawn that you do not use. And I'm just going to suggest a few of them in this talk. There's a whole other talk, plus I've written articles for Western Nurseries. You can find them. Pennsylvania sedge, Carex pennsylvanica. This is a great one for shade, full shade, dry shade. If you have pines, if there's an area of like pines and oaks that's shady and very dry in your property and you can't get any grass to grow, this will grow there. It grows slowly in the beginning and then it gets going. What's great about this is it's done growing by June. So if you mow it in June, it stays that way. It does all of its growth in the spring. And it's a wonderful pollinator plant. If you let it go, it gets to be about 6 to 10 inches. It just kind of flops over and forms these wonderful, beautiful drifts. So I'm a big fan of just letting it go. But if you like it cut down, that's okay too. Purple lovegrass. So where Carex pennsylvanica can kind of form like a definite familiar lawn alternative, purple lovegrass is a little different. But it is a wonderful lawn alternative for that back 40. Again, when you have like that back 20, 30 feet of your lawn that you don't want to mow anymore, this is a great alternative grass that you can put there. Slow to moderate grower, great for pollinators, 8 to 14 inches tall, loves that dry, sunny soil. So if you have that back part of your lawn that's just dry, sunny, and you just are tired of managing it, this is actually extremely beautiful to put in there, especially in the fall. This is the fall picture. You can see it kind of has this purple hue to it, and it does eventually kind of start to grow and knit itself together. Prairie dropseed. This is a sun part shade plant. This is another great one, similar to Carex pennsylvanica. I use this one in the landscape on the regular, not as a lawn alternative. It does get rather tall, like 36 inches tall when it gets full on, and it just turns golden in the fall. It's great. It has wonderful seeds for the songbirds if you don't cut it back. So it's slow to start, but then we'll begin to spread. What I'm showing you here is a test plot of growing it out as a lawn alternative. So when you just let it go and let it grow, again, in those back 40, you just have this nice even green. You wouldn't have to mow it. It would still, you'd have your nice mown lawn, and then you could have this. And you'd have that nice green, and that back little piece you wouldn't have to maintain. It would just do its own thing. Woodland strawberry, as I mentioned, is one of my favorites. This is an extremely vigorous grower. It will take full sun to part shade, average to dry soil, gets to be about 3 inches tall. When it starts, it's very slow to get started, and then it goes. It goes and it sends out runners. And so there's many benefits to this. One of them was the fall color that you saw. The other, you have spring flowers. If you're looking, they're very small. On top of that, after those spring flowers, they're about the size of your pinky nail, but they are the most delicious strawberries you will ever have if you can get to them before nature gets to them. But they are the sweetest strawberries. You can have a whole bushel of those Driscoll strawberries, and they will not even hold a candle altogether to that little teeny tiny wild strawberry. So that is all great. The other piece is this loves to get beat up. You can walk all over it. You can't necessarily play soccer on it, but you can walk all over it. And if after a number of years it all knits together, because it is a prolific grower, it will produce less fruit. So if it's the fruit that you want, all you need to do is go through and pull holes in it and make it start actually actively growing again, and it'll start producing fruit again for you. So you can really beat the crap out of this, walk all over it. It's great. This is a wonderful lawn alternative. It's extremely vigorous. So this could, migrate into other areas if you don't keep an eye on it. But it's also not so hard to pull up and manage. So if it starts to send out runners into your garden or into parts of your lawn that you don't want, you just pull those runners and they're gone. It's relatively easy to pull up and maintain. Clover. Clover is a non-native. Clover, if you have dogs, is the best thing you could put in your lawn because clover is pea-proof. So if you want to have a green lawn and dogs, then plant clover. You can plant an entire clover lawn if you'd like. Otherwise, you can just seed clover into the lawn that you have, and it will slowly, especially if you seed enough of it, it will slowly begin to take over. Clover's great because it is nice, it's soft. It only gets to be about as tall as your lawn gets. You can mow it, so it's great, and it just all blends in. Like I said, non-native, but it is a benefit to the generalist pollinators. If you are afraid of stepping on bees, having grandchildren step on bees, having kids step on bees, whatever that might be, if you're afraid of that, then all you have to do is just mow it when it flowers. And then all the flowers are gone, and then you don't have to worry about stepping on bees. But it also is one of the things that, again, I do it with many youth groups, is finding 4-leaf clovers. Now, it sounds like it's just a fun thing to do and a way to keep kids active for a long time. Go find the 4-leaf clover, and they'll be gone forever. And that's wonderful. You have peace and quiet. What it actually does, especially if you, it's great if you do it as an adult, but if you do it with children, it actually reawakens your ability to see patterns in nature. And so the best luck, the best thing that comes from finding a 4-leaf clover is the fact that you can find more 4-leaf clovers, because you begin to recognize patterns in nature and they'll begin to jump out at you. The 4-leaf clovers will. But that will also, it's an innate ability that we have, that we evolved with, that we forgot. And so it's just recognizing those things. So when you train yourself or you train your children to recognize patterns in nature, nature will begin to look different to you. And it kind of opens up a window and makes nature that much more magical. So low-mow mixes. I am sure you have heard of these. I am sure you have thought of these. There are pros and cons to the low-mow mix. They are not the end-all. If you have seen certain people selling low-mow mixes, they are not the end-all be-all. There are a couple out there. Pearls Premium, which I'm sure you've heard of and or seen. North Country Organics also has one. All the low-mow mixes are pretty much the same seed. So There isn't one really isn't any better than the other. As long as you're getting a reputable brand, you will get one that will germinate. Low-mow mixes are low-mow because they are slower growing. They are not no maintenance. They are not no mow. It is a turf lawn. They are extremely, it's a very fine lawn. It comes in like baby hair and stays like that. It's not a robust like what we're used to for turf grass. It's a very fine grass. It takes a while to come in. When it does, it's a great lawn. When it does, it is a low mow mix. You do not have to mow it as often. I usually mix them with clover. But it is something to consider. Again, this is not a native alternative, but it is a lawn alternative. If you are trying to take fertilizers out of the equation, if you're trying to take all of these other sides and inputs out of the equation, then these are all alternatives that you can use. And by taking all those out, like I said, we have healthy soil life. When we have healthy soil life and healthy lawns and plant life, then we have clean water coming through. So that's an extremely important point that we need to think about and remember. But the low mow mix does not mean no maintenance. So don't ever get it twisted, and don't ever let anybody tell you that that's the case, because that is certainly not the case whatsoever. So jumping back to gardens, there are 7 native gardens. Little tiny right here, so you can't see them. 7 native gardens on the Weston website for free. I designed them a couple years ago. They are up, full-on plant list, full-on garden design, 100 square feet. It tells you all the plants that you need, and so you can go on. There is one for endangered pollinator species. There's one for all pollinator species. There's one for songbirds. There's one for wet. There's one for shade. There's one for the hell strip, which is the area between the sidewalk and the street that's always very salty and very peed upon. So there are native plants. Like I said, there's a native plant for every situation. So you can go out there. The color representation is all in the flowers. So in that left-hand picture, you can see there's purple flowers, white flowers, red flowers. There's a hummingbird garden on there. So you should just go on and check it out. It's all free. And yes, I have made it. So one of the reasons I came to Weston was to develop the native program. So we are growing all the plants on the list that you find there. So if you're looking to find them, that is where you can find them. You can also find them, like I said, this information is for free. I like being here because I want to empower all of you to do the right thing and to do the things that you would like in your garden. I want to give you all the information so that when you're finding a landscaper, you have the information and you know the questions to ask. So if I can empower you to either vet the right professional or do the right thing in your yard, that's great, and that's a win for me. So this is great. There are no shame in loving exotics, okay? Because I know I've been talking all about native plants. There's absolutely no shame in liking exotic plants. Doug Tallamy, if you have read Doug Tallamy, is a big fan of the 70-30, 70% native, 30% exotic. I too like exotic plants. Like I said, I'm not a kill your lawn guy, and I too like exotic plants. So there are definitely exotic plants that I work in. There are nativars that I will use and use in people's landscapes. There are benefits to this. The one type of native plant that I forgot to mention is called native select. So a nativar is a cultivar of a native plant. A native select is a natural occurring mutation. So in the wild or in a field of plants being grown, one of them maybe was smaller than all the others. And then they are able to clone that. So it is an actual native plant, and then it was cloned, so it will always come out that way. Now, a cloned plant, too, does not have all the ecological benefits of a natural occurring plant. However, a native select, if you have to weigh them out, you have straight species, native select, nativar, and then you get into exotics and cultivars, etc. So that would be the order that it would go in. Now, I like native selects because they're great for like our landscapes. They're wonderful. So the straight species of some certain native shrubs is going to be like 8 by 8. It's going to swallow your house like that rhododendron probably is. So I'm not going to do that to you. What I'm going to do is use a native select, which, like I said, isn't as beneficial as the straight species, but it's going to get to be like 4 by 4. That's a great foundation planting. You can still see out your windows in 10 years and you won't be cursing me. So 70-30 is the balance you want to go with. But you know what? If you just get one of those plants that we were talking about, if you go onto the Weston list and you just get one of those plants, you're actually doing something. If you just think about what you are, if you're shrinking your lawn, or you're thinking about how you treat your lawn, and then what that does to the soil, what that does to our groundwater, etc. If you think it through and start thinking the full chain and the whole circle of life and connectivity, you'll just be more aware, and that's really what I'm hoping for. So with that, I am hoping there are tons and bunches and thousands of questions. You have been wonderful. Thank you so much. This has been great.
Something's alternating between the room and our friends on Zoom.
So
Why
right
don't we
here,
start
though,
with the room?
real quick, Fred, right here is all of my contact information. So should you decide to tackle a pollinator garden, a lawn alternative, your own landscape, etc., any way that you want, you can absolutely contact me. I don't say that lightly. I put this out there all the time, and inevitably people will call me and say, you know what, I saw your presentation, I want to do a pollinator garden, this is what I'm thinking, or can you come and look at my yard, or do you think this tree will work in this situation, and we can just talk it through. Like I said, I want to empower you. I'm hoping that I inspired you, and now I want to empower you to do this. So there it is right there. Please do use it. The Weston Nurseries email is the best way to get me. I will see that right away. So go ahead, let's do questions.
Questions? Yes.
This is a really specific question. The strawberries. I got strawberries. I think they're Fujaria virginica. I looked at woodland strawberry. It says woodland strawberry is Fujaria vesca. Do you know which one you were showing? And can you compare?
That's the Virginiana, the one,
That's
the one that you have. Both are called woodland strawberry.
Okay.
One is just a little smaller than the other.
Oh.
That's the Virginiana.
Okay, so you showed the Virginia. Okay.
Ground cover that might be good around a black walnut tree.
Getting specific here.
Wow, that got really in and really tight. I actually have a list. If you send me an email, and I'll send you the list, because that's very specific and in there, so I can give you the list of all the things that will grow under black walnut. Yes, in fact.
Let's take one from Zoom.
Okay,
We'll go back
one
and
from
forth
Zoom.
So that our friends out there don't feel left out.
We have one, I just saw it from Barbara Keogh. What about moss that grows in the lawn?
Okay, moss is an indicator that you have a lot of moisture and acidity. So if the moss itself isn't hurting anything. So it's soft, it's green. I usually like to leave it. If you do not want moss in your lawn, then change the pH of your lawn. So if you have a lot of oaks and pines on your property, you have definitely a low pH. So the typical New England pH is about 5.5. If you have oaks and pines, you're probably down in the 4.5 to 5 range. This is one reason many people can't grow grass. One of many reasons, but many of us are trying to have this beautiful lawn with all of our oaks and pines in between the shade and between the acidity, because your turf grass wants 6.5 as far as a pH is concerned. So if you want to get rid of the moss, or you want to have a healthier lawn, then you need to get your pH up into that. You can do that naturally, of course, via lime. If you are going to, my best recommendation to have a healthy lawn, first, change what you think your lawn should look like. It's okay to have clover, it's okay to have violets. If it's even green, it's not a bad thing. I would like to ask you to try to accept that. Maybe say that to yourself when you're looking at your lawn. Be like, it's even green, it's not a bad thing. So you start with that. So having the mixed species, definitely one thing. In the fall, aerate, compost, overseed, and lime. If a green lawn is what you're going for, you're going to aerate your lawn, because compaction is the big enemy of grass, of our gardens, of our landscapes in general. Compaction is the secret contributor to climate change. So you want to aerate your lawn. You want to spread a thin layer of compost over your lawn. This is your natural fertilizer. The compost itself will get down into the holes of the aeration but it will also feed the soil life. If you have compacted soil, all of that compost will help decompact the soil. If you have clay soils, all of that compost will help dilute the clay and break up your clay soils. So just aerate and compost in the fall is definitely the one thing you can do. If you're trying to change the pH, that's when you will add the lime. And if you're trying to thicken your grass, if you're trying to eliminate some weeds, if we're going to call them weeds, if you're going to try to do that, then aerate, compost, and overseed, because the more grass seed you have growing, the fewer weeds you will have. Now, if you have compacted soils, you are going to have crabgrass. That's Mother Nature's answer to compacted soils. If you have a lawn service and an irrigation system, this is something I teach everybody. Do not run your irrigation on the days that the lawn guys come, because what will happen is your irrigation goes off at, say, 4 in the morning. It's going to saturate the top 2 inches of soil. The lawn guys are going to come. They're going to drive all over your lawn. And wet soil compacts even more. So they're going to compact that soil. They're going to squeeze all the life, all the water holding capacity, and air capacity out of your soil. You will then have compacted soil. What did I just say? Compacted soil leads to crabgrass. You know what that lawn company is going to do? They're going to say, hey, you got crabgrass. I got something I can sell you for that. And you know what you're not going to do? Say, the crabgrass is your fault. Do it for free. So this is it's kind of a vicious cycle that we get ourselves on. So aerate, compost, overseed.
Question from,
So this builds on your point there about composting, building soil organic matter, and then what do you think about removing or not grass cuttings, twigs, acorns, all that sort of stuff that actually builds soil organic matter?
That's a great question. It's actually something that I promised I was going to talk about and then forgot. So thank you for reminding me. So garden maintenance, the way I maintain my garden. So grass clippings, absolutely leave them. Twigs, we don't want to step on them, nor acorns. So if you want to rake those out, that's okay. In your gardens, in your perennial beds, leave the leaves and leave it standing. So right now, my garden bed is a thick bed of leaves with a bunch of twigs sticking through it. When the snow was there, it was gorgeous. It was just like all these, brown branches and everything sticking out. Now it's kind of like a brown meh. But what you want to do is you want to leave all of that, because that's where your pollinators are. That's where the fireflies are. I don't know if you have fireflies out here. I haven't seen them in forever. I used to have them in jars under the blankets with me. Not anymore. And my kids have never seen fireflies. So it's heartbreaking. So, and that's one of the indicators, and where people are now starting to notice that. The thing is once all of us time out, there's not going to be anybody who remembered fireflies. So nobody's going to miss them. So we're the last that are going to miss them, so we should do something about it. So anyhow, back to your question. I leave the leaves, I leave all the twigs and everything standing, because the echinacea and the rudbeckia and everything, when it goes by, that feeds the birds all winter. The asters feed the birds all winter. The hollow stems provide shelter for all the pollinators that I spent all summer planting for. The leaf litter hides all the caterpillars and all the pollinators that I spent all summer planting for. So if you want to have a pollinator garden, if you want more butterflies in your garden, then you need to provide for the entire life cycle, which means you need to have host plants that they'll nibble on. Then you need to have nectar plants. That's the one we all focus on. But then you have to provide shelter for them over the winter. And if you blow every last leaf off your property, you've blown every last pollinator off your property. And then you have to start again. So you've actually undone everything that you tried to do before. So again, leaving the leaf litter. What you do is you wait till spring. And once you start seeing things flying around, usually it's a week of 50-degree weather, you will start to see bees and flies and things in the air. Then what you want to do is you want to cut your garden back. When you cut your garden back, you want to cut it back to about 6 to 8 inches. So you don't cut it down to the nub. You don't cut it down to the ground. Cut it to about 6 to 8 inches. Because all of those native bees and everything that we were talking about will then make their nests in those stems. So my garden in April looks a little awkward. It looks a little awkward because this is how I do it. I do not mulch my entire garden. I only mulch the first 2-3 feet of my beds. So I edge the beds, I mulch the first 2-3 feet. I leave everything behind wide open for the ground nesting bees. I don't necessarily want the ground nesting bees, which are the native bumblebees, in the front of the bed, because that's where people are all the time. But if I put them towards the back of the beds, that's fine. So they'll nest back there. Everything that I cut down, I leave there. So that's why my beds look a little awkward, because it's like got this nice, neat edge. It's got a little bit of mulch there in the front, and then after that, it's everything that I cut down the year before, and it's a bunch of like 6 to 8 inches, like stems. That's only for like a week or two. Then everything comes up, and by May, you can't see it at all. And nature's doing her thing in my garden, love and life. The bees are coming, the butterflies are happening, the birds are coming back, and everything is going great in my garden, and it actually looks beautiful. However, there is that little awkward phase. It's like a new haircut. It's just like it looks awkward for a little bit, and then you kind of do it out, and I know, talking about hair, I get it. But it's true. So yes.
Yes, you talked about septic meadows. I have a septic system that's going to be done. Our Board of Health talks about grass and needing to mow it twice. I'm wondering what the alternative might be and whether our Board of Health would agree with it.
So the alternative would be a septic meadow, either planted into that grass. If like the protocol is you have to put the grass down, then you can plant a meadow into that grass. And you can move like all the echinacea and the asters and everything into that, and it'll like outgrow the grass. And the grass will die out, and you'll have this beautiful meadow, and you'll have this area. Because what happens with the septic systems is the topsoil gets taken away, and you have all this subsoil, which is relatively denuded and poor soils. So then if you come at it with native plants that don't mind poor soils, and you add just a little bit of compost and jumpstart nature, then you will actually have growing plants, beautifully growing plants. But to grow actual turf there, you are going to need this nutrient-rich soil and this perfect pH, and you're not going to get it with all that subsoil because they've dug everything up. So that's where the meadows are great, because you're providing habitat. It's usually an expansive space, depending on where it is. It's usually a large space that you don't actually interact with that much anyway. So you're like, what do I do with it? You know, you may or may not have the vent pipe there. That's real easy to cover when you have 3 foot, 4 foot tall plants all around it. You get 6 foot tall Joe Pye weed, you know, you're not going to see that at all. So,
Let's take
Trevor,
another from the Zoom.
yeah.
and actually, can you repeat questions? I got that from the
Sure,
Zoom
yeah.
audience. They can't hear. But here's one from Zoom. Do you have some advice on eradicating gout weed?
You really have to just repeatedly dig it up. If you're not going to use a chemical, like a one-time chemical application, what you need to do is either dig it up or try to solarize it, or a little bit of both. Solarizing is when you cover it and smother it and just let it kind of cook out. Normally gout weed is in the shade, so you're really just trying to smother it. But what happens is once you take whatever you're using to cover it, whether it be a tarp or cardboard and mulch, when you take that off, if it's in a shady area, it usually will bounce back. So the best thing to do would be to either just continue to dig it out, and many of our invasive or extremely aggressive plants, the best thing to do is just to go at them. Lily of the Valley is the same way. You just have to, if you keep going at it and digging at it, it will eventually come out. That's also one that you can smother and usually get rid of. But
Can you take another Zoom question?
sure.
Would you repeat the definition of a native select?
Okay. Native select is a naturally occurring mutation of a plant. Normally you find them in shrubs. So it's a shrub, usually a shrub, that has been found, and it is smaller in stature, or has a brighter fall color, or a heavier berry set than the straight species. So so it is a native plant, but what they do is they find this native plant, this naturally occurring mutation, and then they clone it, so you have it again and again and again. So is it a native plant? Yes, but its ecological value is diminished because it is cloned again and again, and real ecological value and real climate resiliency comes from mutations and natural mutations, and just being able to naturally pollinate and cross-pollinate and hybridize.
I have one more question. You kind of addressed it about the spring cleanup and not cutting all your perennials back in the echinacea and all that. In terms of we have so many trees that if we didn't clean up any leaves anywhere, we probably have 6 inches of leaves. And it's almost like it smothers to a certain extent the stuff that's trying to get.
So there are
Is there
situations.
some balance?
There is a balance.
The question?
So the question is, what happens if you have a lot of leaves in your bed? Then what do you do? So with a lot of leaves in your bed, what I would still wait. So if you can wait, and it depends on how many leaves, but there can be too many. So if you have woods to blow them into, or you can move them to, I would still wait until it gets warm, because once it gets warm is when all of those pollinators that we were talking about, all those beneficial insects have emerged. Then you can rake out your bed somewhat, you can rake out your bed all the way, and try to leave those leaves in the woods. You still want to have that cover, but if you have to choose, my suggestion would be to remove the leaves and then cut back your perennials and leave those. Because what's happening when you do that is your perennials, your plants, just like fruits and vegetables, they grow all year and they draw up nutrients from the soil. When you cut them down and put them on the curb and have them taken away, you're removing nutrients from your property. In which case, you then do have to fertilize, because you've just taken all of the minerals and all of the nutrients off your property. If you leave it there, then all of those nutrients will return back to the soil, and you will not have to fertilize, you will not have to do anything. So you'll have the organic matter, you'll have the nutrients, and all of that. So by taking away those leaves, you do take away some of that. The biggest thing with removing leaves is harming whatever pollinators and things that might be living in those leaves. So if you can wait until it warms up a bit and then do it, that's when you do it.
Let's take another from Zoom.
Yeah, they're piling up in Zoom here.
Okay, we'll take 2 from Zoom then.
I'm going to read a long one here. Are you able to give again a brief overview of converting a section of lawn over to native grass like PA sedge? Also, is rototilling necessary, or is there other options to keep carbon in the ground like lasagna style with cardboard and soil?
Excellent question. And yes and yes. So rototilling, not great. If you are going to rototill, it's a one-time thing, because when you do that, think about any image that you've seen of like a massive earthquake. So when you rototill, there's a whole network, there's a whole community, there's a city in the soil. And when you rototill, you just turn all of that up and you break all the connections and you tear the families apart, and it's awful. You also release all of the carbon that's in the soil into the atmosphere. So lasagna gardening is the process of laying down cardboard, then laying down mulch, then planting through that. That is one way to go about it. Oftentimes I have people who do not want cardboard in their yard, so if you can and you do that, that's a great way to do it. It's extremely healthy, you protect the soil, you protect the soil life. If that is not your way, or if you do not have that patience, then I suggest a sod cutter set at a shallow level, so you're only scalping the crown. So you're killing the grass, but you're not digging into the soil. You're leaving all the roots in the soil, they can rot in the soil. You've now cut the grass off at the crown. You put down maybe a 1/2 inch to 1 inch of compost and then plant into that. So that's the way I most often, for many of our clients, handle that. Because like I said, they don't necessarily want to have refrigerator boxes decomposing in their lawn. If you can do it that way though, that is great.
Let's take another from Zoom,
Yep.
because we have quite a number.
Are there specific plants you can recommend for coastal environment, river, ocean, where there's much wind and salt?
So yes, there are, and I would ask.
Could you repeat that question?
So the question is, are there specific plants for coastal environments, rivers and oceans, etc.? To this person, I would say, please email me, just like the black walnut question, Trevor S. @westonnurseries.com, or you can go to the Native Plant Trust website. This is a great resource. Native Plant Trust, you go to their plant finder and use all of their filters, and it will spit out native plants that you're looking for. You can find the black walnut that way, but I will address the black walnut specifically. But yes, for anybody who is looking for specific plant lists like that, please just email me and I will be more than happy to give you a dozen plants to start working with. All the way in the back.
Hi, I have a question about the use of systemics in the nursery business.
Sure.
Because I've talked to nurseries and asked them if they use systemics, they usually say, no, we don't. But then when I say, do your wholesale providers, have they used it at any point in the supply chain? They usually say, we don't know.
Exactly.
So, is there some way that Weston Nurseries is making sure that there's no systemics anywhere in the life cycle of the plant?
So
Could you repeat?
I'm going to. So the question is about neonics and systemics used in the nursery trade, and how do you determine? So for those that don't know, neonicotinoids are systemic, which means that it's put into the soil as the plant is being grown, taken up into the plant, and it presents itself in the pollen and nectar of the plant. So then what happens is the bees come to the flower because they don't know any different, and then they take that pollen back to the hive, and it ends up wiping out hives. It ends up deforming the bees. It poisons the hive. And it is very hard to determine whether a plant has been grown with neonics or not. So I can tell you that anything Weston grown is not grown with neonics. All of our native plants, you will actually find at some point in time, especially the milkweed, will have aphids on it. We leave the aphids because the aphids bring the wasps and the lacewings, and they take care of it for us. However, we do not use any kind of sides, or especially neonics, in the production of our plants. The plants that we bring in, some do, some vendors will not reveal. So you do need to ask, and this is one of the things you do need to ask the staff. But if you find anything Weston grown, you're sure that it does not. Many of the annuals, if you're ever shopping for annuals for your containers, yes, almost all annuals are grown with neonics. We do have some vendors that do not, though. So and we're trying to really separate and determine, because this is a big question, and it's a question that I've been asking for decades now. And we're getting to the point where neonics are being phased out, but when they're not, you don't want to really, then you're not doing the good that you think you are. If you plant a pollinator garden with treated plants, then you are actually just creating this awful trap for all the pollinators that you are trying to encourage.
You know, the garden in the woods, they don't use neonics, and then also, I think Home Depot at one point pledged not to use.
Home Depot has a mix.
Okay.
Or at least they did. Many of the big box stores have a mix of certain that they will say do not have neonics. There's like a tag. So like I said, you have to ask or you have to look for the tag. You're not going to get a knowledgeable person probably at a big box store, but you can look for the tag, definitely. But it is something to be aware of. That's a great question.
Let's take another from the,
Would you comment on the impact of jumping worms on native plants? Should anything be done to the soil?
Okay, so the question is about Asian jumping worms. You may or may not have them. You may or may not know that you have them. You will. They are here, and for now they are here to stay. There isn't anything that will kill necessarily the Asian jumping worm. You can pick them out of your soil and throw them in a bucket of hydrogen peroxide. Or in a bag and cook them, as many people do on their driveway. I mean, it's all gruesome stuff, but the Asian jumping worm is awful. So we do not have any native worms, earthworms, here in the United States. The European nightcrawler, the European earthworm, is relatively benign. The Asian jumping worm is a voracious feeder, and it tears through all of the organic matter. What does this mean? Well, in doing so, for instance, if you plant impatiens, it will eat the roots of the impatiens. It also eats our native plant seeds, and it eats the leaf litter, which many of our native plants really need to grow, which is another reason not to blow all the leaves off your property. If you want to grow native plants, especially something like trillium, trillium needs 4 to 6 inches of leaf litter to grow. And so what happens a lot, not so much out here, but in many of the properties I go to, people are like, I just spent $26 on this one trillium and it died in the first year. I'm like, well, that's because you blew every single piece of organic matter off your property and left it naked with this red mulch. And guess what trillium doesn't like? So, so the Asian jumping worm is a massive danger to our forests. It is a extreme nuisance and somewhat of a danger to our managed landscapes. What does it mean as far as native plants are concerned? Well, first it eats the native plant seeds, which in doing so means, especially in the wild, we don't have any seedlings, which means, like small seedlings, which means that, say, the deer are going to eat the saplings. If the deer eat the saplings, then we do not have the next generation of forest, and we've actually doomed our forest in the long term. They also create an amazing environment for invasive plants, such as bittersweet, such as buckthorn, especially buckthorn, because their droppings and how they treat the soil changes the pH of the soil and increases the calcium of the soil, which is exactly what the buckthorn wants and the native plants do not want. So they're actually making the soil sweeter for our invasive plants while they eat our native plant seeds and damage the future arboreal forests that we have. So it is a threat, it is a bad thing, but there is nothing yet that we have found to do about it. There are things you can go online and you can find ways that people have said, well, if you do this, you can control or you can reduce their impact in your garden. One is diatomaceous earth, I've heard, that if you throw that down, the sharp diatomaceous earth deters them from your garden. Well, that just pushes them somewhere else. It doesn't kill them, it just makes them go elsewhere. So they may not be in your garden, you may have just pushed them out into your woods. So there's really a no-win situation other than just kind of picking them and getting rid of them. The good thing is they stay in the top 3 to 4 inches of soil, so they're all right there. And you can't miss them because they're worms that move like snakes. So they don't move like the worms that we grew up with. So that is, I guess, the jumping.
Yeah, Trevor, I have a question for you. I'm assuming that there are many people here and who have been watching you remotely who are now inspired to go forth and turn some or all of their yard into a native habitat. What would you and assuming that they don't have any experience in gardening and landscaping, what would you recommend they do to get started?
Look at the 7 gardens online at Weston. Go to the Weston website, go to the Native Plant Trust website. But like I said, those gardens that I put together for Weston are a great starting point. You can either do it yourself, or I am more than happy to come to anybody's property and just walk it with you, talk it with you, and then provide you with a full-on plant list and an estimate if you'd like. So that's what I do for a living. So I can absolutely design your garden for you, or you can do it yourself. You can definitely email me and I can answer your questions. Like I said, one way or the other, we can get this done. So, and I'm certainly, if you are a person who wants to plant and take care of, like work in your own garden, and some people just like to look at it, some people like to really be a part of it. I will never get in the way of that. I will never ever get in the way of somebody interacting with their garden. I will not come to your property and be like, I got this, just go inside. No, if you like to be in your garden, then I will help you work in your garden and accomplish what you are trying to do yourself and not get in the way of that, because interacting with nature, interacting with the earth and being a part of that, finding the rhythm of the seasons, and the more we're out in our garden, the more we notice the seasons, the more we notice the little teeny tiny blooms. What I really like is the more I can get you out into your garden, if I design your garden for you, the more you notice what I did. Because more often than not, I go to people's houses and I'm like, hey, how about that leaf combination out there? You see that this is blooming and those leaves are doing? They're like, what are you talking about? I'm like, wow, I was like up all night coming up with that one. I really thought I was a rock star on that one, and it just took, okay. So the more you're out there, the more you're going to notice. For instance, the geranium maculatum that we were talking about before so much. The straight species actually turns red in the fall. It's really cool. So you get like the green, you get the green mound. You're feeding 30 some odd, different insects. You get the beautiful purple flowers, and then it turns red in the fall. That's great. Amsonia is another one of my favorites. It's not necessarily native to here in Massachusetts, but it is a ecoregion 59 native. That's great. It's got wonderful light blue flowers in the spring, and then it turns gorgeous gold, which is why I planted it. Because you really get 2 seasons out of it. You get the wonderful blue flowers. They're small and they're fleeting. So if you're not really paying attention at that time of the spring, you might miss it. However, you can't miss the gold. It's a beacon. If it's down the street at your neighbor's house, it will beat you over the head. It is just brilliant. So I absolutely love using it. Yeah.
Me?
Yes, you.
Yes. I have 2 questions unrelated to one another. One is kind of a new practice called No Mow May, and I want to get your opinion, the benefits, negatives of it. And the other, I had a question about Bovex.
Okay, so no mow May, and then what is your question about Bovex?
Bovex, well, we call it the yucky stuff. It's a deer deterrent, as you know. I was concerned, I've been trying to do some research to see if it's a systemic, if it affects pollinators. And what I've been reading says it doesn't, but I don't want to,
It does. To my knowledge and everything that I've read, and I'm really up on like the mosquito spraying and everything that's going on, even if it's organic. From anything I've read, so the question was, will Bovex hurt pollinators, which is the deer deterrent? And from everything I know, the answer is no. So that is not the end-all be-all, but from how I know it, it does not. It's gross. It's just garlic and everything else, so it will not hurt your pollinators. The other question was no mow May. Is no mow May a good thing? I will say yes. So no mow May is not just fun to say, but it is designed to make us aware of lawn care and how we just habitually just have this routine of going at our lawns. So no mow May, part of the benefit, or the major benefit, is that there are certain flowers that are coming up in May that are then available for the early pollinators. So at first it makes you aware of lawn care, and then it actually provides food for many of those early pollinators. So before many of our gardens are getting going, there are the violets, there are some of the clovers, there are the bluets, whatever you might have in your lawn. These little delicate flowers will come up in May, and they are providing food for those early pollinators. So by no mow May, you are actually helping our local pollinator species. By no mow May, you're saving yourself a couple bucks. By no mow May, you're realizing how we just mindlessly go at our lawns and lawn care. So it makes you a little more aware. Something else in line with that is like a rain barrel. Rain barrels are great, but rain barrels only hold like 50 to 75 gallons of water. Coming down your downspout, usually in a 1-inch rain event, I don't know the size of your houses, but probably anywhere from like 150 to 400 gallons of water. So that 50-gallon rain barrel is great, but it is a little small compared to what is coming down your downspout. Why do I love rain barrels? Because it makes us aware of rain capture. It makes us aware of water conservation. So very similar in that this act makes you aware of the connectedness of everything and the things that you can do. So if we all just do something, like I said, you don't have to go out and like wipe out everything in your garden and start all over again. Certainly not. Certainly not. Just incorporate some of the plants that we've talked about. If you have a giant burning bush, which many people do, if you have a giant burning bush on your property, okay, if you are not ready to replace it, then don't. Is it invasive? Absolutely. Do I want you to get rid of it eventually? Absolutely. But it might be the only thing screening from your neighbor's bathroom or kitchen, and you don't want to see it. So, okay, I get that. And whatever shrub you put in place will probably be a lot smaller. So until you're ready to replace it, until your budget or until your sensibilities are there, don't just go tearing it out just because. Do I want you to? Absolutely. I would love all the barberry, all the burning bush, go ahead. Just pull them all out of there. However, not until you're ready. because, you know, gardening and everything, it's an investment. So I'm not asking you to throw tons and tons of money at your yard until you're ready to throw some money at your yard. So just do better is all I'm asking. Do just a little bit, and that will be something. And if we all just do a little bit with the 30 some odd people online and the 40 some odd people here, we're doing a lot of bits. So that's great.
Trevor, there's
Trevor,
over
the,
50 people online.
Huh?
There's over 50 people.
Okay, great.
Question from online, how to remove English ivy that is on the ground and growing up trees?
You have to tear it out. So the question is how to remove English ivy? Tear it out. Just like the gout weed, tear it out. It's the only thing you can do. You just got to keep going at it. One more online?
If I can get
I'll
there.
take this question here. Go ahead.
I don't mind that things eat my garden. This last summer, the bird quadrupeds, probably deer, rabbits, the two plants I care most about, purple milkweed, New England latris, both endangered rare plants in New England. I was lucky enough to get a source from. They took them to the ground. And I'm gonna use cages this next year on some of them, even though they look a little bad. I don't know if there's anything else you can recommend for deer and rabbit control.
Sure. So the question is about deer and rabbit control, and I'm going to give you, and then I'll get to your question. There are two methods that I use. If you are going to use like a Bobex or something like that, you want to use a granular and a liquid. And you need to get the granular down as soon as the plants start to come up. Once the rabbits and the deer have discovered those plants, then they will, it's like a kid knowing that the candy jar is on the top shelf. They will find a way to get there. But if you make it gross from the start, that's what you want to do. So you want to use a granular because especially in spring you have all that rain. So the liquid you'll just keep going, going, going. You also, especially for deer, want to keep them guessing. If you keep alternating back and forth, then it's never the same thing. If you apply the same thing all the time, they get used to it, they get over it, and they move on. So for your perennials, that is a great way to do it. The way to naturally deer and rabbit proof your garden, and it's not really a proof, it's a deterrent. Deer and rabbits, but deer do not like anything minty, they do not like anything oniony, they do not like anything fuzzy, they do not like anything prickly. So if you are to plant, say, the front of your garden with catmint, non-native, but you could do that. If you are to then work alliums into your garden, they don't have to be the giant ones. You can use the smaller, the native nodding onion is another great one. It does so, but it's having onions in your garden. Then they have to, like a rabbit would have to crawl through the mint, gross, onions, gross, to get to what you're trying to do. I proved this theory because I was working on the South Shore and a client had a line of hydrangea that were just getting decimated by deer. So what we did was a line of catmint, a line of onions, then we used things like mountain mint and bee balm, other things from the mint family, created this beautiful, colorful, long bed, and the hydrangeas in the back. So then the deer and the rabbit had to push through like all layers of gross. And did they ever get to the hydrangea? Yes. Was it ever decimated? No, never. So if you want to, rabbits do not like mint, they do not like onion. Don't plant tulips, by the way. Just plant daffodils, okay? Don't plant tulips because everybody, including people, eat tulips, but do not eat tulips, okay? I mean, do not plant tulips. You can eat tulips. Chocolate dipped tulips, if you've ever followed me on my Instagram, you can see my chocolate dipped tulips. They're actually great. But yes, so mint, onions, and then we have prickly and fuzzy.
So daffodils, you call that an allium?
Daffodils are not. They're just a bulb that nobody will eat.
Okay.
But allium, there's the nodding onion, there is the like lavender bubbles, there's all these, like, so you bring those in. Anything like the chivy type things that stay low, bushy, lots of flowers. Rabbits will, they will not necessarily want to push through that to get to some of the stuff that you like so much. So yes.
Cicada wasps, what do you have to say about them?
Cicada wasps or cicadas themselves? The cicada wasp?
Cicada wasp.
Cicada wasps.
Cicada killer?
They're awful.
The digger ones.
Yeah, the digger ones.
They call cicada killers.
Yeah, they're huge. The killer cicada wasps, they're not really killer.
Like sandy soil.
They like sandy soil.
Yeah, so
they
I
like
mean,
our septic.
so ma'am, I'm trying to think, I'm trying to make sure that we're talking about the same thing. So there's the great blue or the great orange digger wasps, which,
They're called cicada wasps.
but if, are they, and so yes, I believe we're talking about the same thing, and they don't sting,
No.
and they don't
They're
really
nasty.
they don't really cause any damage. They're just big and scary looking.
Yeah, but they dig, I mean, they make holes in the lawn. So when you were talking about the whole septic thing, because they like our sandy soil back out in our septic, so I'm thinking that maybe if we plant a native, garden back there, maybe they won't dig as much. I don't know how to.
No, they'll probably first. So you could, if you plant a garden and then mulch it, then you've now taken away much of their access to your sandy soil.
Right.
You could also take the time to change the composition of your sandy soil by adding compost to it, and that will by adding that organic.
It's just a really large expanse, and they were really bad a couple of years ago. Last year, not so much because it rained so much.
How really bad? Like, when you say really
Oh,
bad,
it's like there's swarms in our backyard. It's bad.
all right, I've never experienced that, so I can't really
You guys
speak to
haven't
it.
too? Oh,
I've definitely, I believe I know exactly what you're talking about, and I've definitely seen them, but I've never seen them to be a problem.
so much that our lawn people, 2 summers ago, they wouldn't come because they were so scared of them. Well, I'm stuck.
Maybe,
There you go.
yeah, I really,
We'll invite you over this summer. You can see.
yeah, I don't have it, I've never experienced that, so I honestly can't speak to that, I'm
I
sorry.
mean, they're enormous.
I'd love to just make something up, but having never experienced that, I can't really give you
Interesting.
a great answer.
Because I'm just curious, like, if they're migrating to this area or like what the deal with it is now. I don't know.
No, the only thing migrating to this area are the murder hornets,
No.
and they're not gonna necessarily harm you. I mean, if you get stung, that's awful, but
Right,
they're not going to actually kill you.
right.
They will kill all the honeybees, though. Go ahead.
Another online question, Trevor.
Yep.
I would love to add some native azaleas to my landscape. Can you recommend any native azaleas for partial shade and moist, well-drained soil? Can I find them at Weston Nursery?
Yes, you can. They are relative, so the question is native azaleas. Can you find them at Weston? Yes, you can. We also have plenty of native R's because Weston is known for cultivating the native azalea. The native azalea is the deciduous one. The native azalea blooms in June and usually blooms in like sherbet colors. And so the viscosum and the fragrant azalea, or the fragrant star azalea, are 2 of the native azaleas. The viscosum is the one that you're looking for, or the swamp azalea. Those are the ones that you will definitely, if you want the natives, that you'll be looking for. And yes, we have both of those at Weston. Do you have another online question?
Certainly.
I'll take that right back here. Go ahead.
Yes, last year I decided to forget the lawn, I'm planting clover. And it came up, and it was looking great, and then within a 2-week period, it disappeared. And left me with patches of like dirt.
And it didn't come back?
No. It's like something ate it.
Again, so the question was about clover that mysteriously disappeared. I would need a lot more information to answer that question. Either that, or I need the Mystery Machine and Scooby-Doo. So I would need a lot more information to drill down on what may have happened in that situation.
I'm afraid to plant more again.
Well, fortunately, I mean, the clover seed itself isn't necessarily very expensive. But yes, I understand you not wanting to plant it again, but I can't without knowing. That's some of the issue with a lot of the landscape questions. I need a lot more information before I can give you a solid answer. Now, that being said, starting in March through October, every Tuesday night, 6 to 7, I do a Zoom Q&A. So you can come, we hang out, we have a great community that shows up. I would love for you to be a part of that community. You show up 6 to 7 Tuesday nights starting in March, and we usually go through the amount of people online ebbs and flows, and we talk about everything. We talk about how to grow vegetables. We talk about nutrient density and farming. We talk about your azaleas that we're talking about online, native plants, non-native plants. We run the entire gamut, and that way we can actually also drill down. But it's a wonderful thing because everybody on there learns from each other. And so I'll get the black walnut question, and I can answer that, and then there's like 5 other people on there who have the same question. So it's great. It's great for that. And then, like I said, over the course of the season, we really do all kind of become friends and really start exchanging things. And then people start to come back and say, hey, I used that, whatever, that combination that you were saying, and it totally brought my plant back to life. Or, I'm starting to see so many more birds because I put such and such in, or I did, so it's great. And then other people will do it as well. So please do. Tuesday nights, join, definitely.
What's right at the nursery?
No, it's online. So you can sign up online. You go to the Weston website. You can sign up online. It's not up there yet, but we'll send you a link. It's the same link all season, and we just hang out. 6 to 7 Tuesday nights.
Sure.
Yes.
Another online question. Talk about sun and semi-shade. What about shade-loving natives?
So shade-loving natives, there are plenty. White turtlehead, the Carex pennsylvanica, tiarella are just a few. Tiarella is also known as foam flower, and those are just a few. There are quite a few more, and I can go on about that. You can go onto the Weston website, find them. You can go on to Native Plant Trust, find them. You can also email me, and I will give you that major list. But in the interest of time, I won't get into those longer lists right now. Another question? Online?
Let's take one.
We'll take one here. Yep, in the back.
I don't have so much a question, but there are some Board of Health people here tonight, and so.
A quorum?
Not a quorum. We have a quorum. We're not talking to each other. So part of the issue with the establishment of grass is because erosion of the septic system that people have just spent a lot of money getting in, and for the integrity of the system that needs to be there. However, if there are people who want to help research, like another approach to that, we could use the help, and I know some of us would certainly welcome, a different approach to managing over septic systems. So, we just don't want trees because that'll work.
Correct. No trees, no shrubs, but perennials are great.
So, Daryl, can I make a comment to add to that? I did just have, you guys just approved my system, and it did have meadow plants on it. Okay.
So what we're talking about for those online is we're talking about septic meadows, putting meadows over your septic system, and why the recommendation is to plant grass, and the recommendation for grass is to eliminate erosion over that dug up area because you don't want your brand new septic to erode away. But we are going to actively discuss in the season to come alternatives to grass over our septic systems, which makes me very happy. So,
The agent has already approved it elsewhere.
and so it has been proven here in town that septic meadows are a thing. They are cool. Join the cool kids. Septic meadows.
I think we're good.
All right, thank you so much, everybody. I appreciate it.